special as part of the YECAPxMovers Climate Series. Today, we will be talking about smart cities and sustainable agriculture. We have two very special guests today. And before we start, maybe for those who don't know me, I'm Karla from the Youth Collab team here in Singapore and part of the Movers community as well. I just learned few weeks back that I'm a Movers builder already, so quite happy about that. And yeah, so I will be the moderator today. Let me just start with the agenda. This is basically what is going to happen. I'm going to just start with an introduction to the UNDP Global Center and introducing our guest speakers. Then I would go to pass it to Calum, who will be sharing more about smart cities, what it really means to build smart cities, aside from this high-tech idea that we sometimes get from all the media. And then we could go to Gandhar, who is going to talk about the sustainable agriculture and climate resilience. We will have some time for discussion, and then I will pass it over to you guys for Q&A. So let's start. First, this is the UNDP Global Center. The full name is quite long, but it's the UNDP Global Center for Technology, Innovation, and Sustainable Development. We are based here in Singapore, and basically this is a joint initiative by the government of Singapore and the United Nations Development Program, and it aims to identify and co-create technological solutions for sustainable development. The center basically curates partnerships, identifies solutions, and connects partners and innovations and with the UNDP Global Network of country offices and development partners. We have focus areas, and these are smart cities, digitalization, sustainable and digital agriculture, sustainable finance, and the youth engagement team, which is the Youth Collab Singapore, and I'm part of this team as well. And now let me just go to the next slide, and I will introduce our very special speakers. We have first Calum. He is an advisor here at the center. He has led innovation, digitalization, and smart cities programs across the UK, Sub-Saharan Africa, and Asia Pacific. Calum has also worked on advising and scaling tech-driven enterprises, including startups focusing on secure network and connectivity, digital identity, and safety and security. Calum has drafted and led legislation, policy, and strategy to roll out smart cities, deliver connectivity programs, and explore Internet of Things related projects. He has worked in local and national government as a strategist and consultant, and in international development. Calum is also co-chair of the Digital Infrastructure Task Force, part of the World Economic Forum G20 Working Group on Smart Cities, and a panel member of the Mayor of London's Infrastructure Advisory Panel. And we also have Gandhar Desai. He is an analyst for sustainable and digital agriculture here at the UNDP Center as well. He is helping scale up the adaptation of digital technologies in developing countries for making sustainable agriculture and climate resilient. Gandhar has over 5 years of experience in the development sector. He has previous work with the AVPN, which is a really, really cool initiative across Asia Pacific. If you haven't heard of them, please check it out. Also with the UNDP in India and the government of Maharashtra. That's not the correct way of pronouncing, but I'm doing my best. And that's his home state back home in India. Gandhar holds a master's in public policy from the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy here at the National University of Singapore. He majored actually in electrical and electronics engineering. We have a lot of engineers in the network, so I wanted to highlight that he's also an engineer, and he also has a minor in philosophy, economics, and politics. But okay, I have been talking enough, I would say, so I will pass it over to Calum to start.
Thanks, Karla, and thanks for the invitation to be here. Let me just share. I think you need to give me permission to share my screen.
Done.
Okay, thank you very much. Great, can you all see my screen? Fantastic. So I'm going to talk to you for about the next 10 or so minutes about smart cities. Karla gave me a fantastic introduction and a very excessive one, but happy to answer any questions about the work at the Global Centre, the work in our kind of work in the development sector more broadly. But I've also worked in government, the private sector, and other places. So happy to pick up any broader questions you might have as well. So just to start with, I want to give you a bit of context about UNDP, the UN Development Programme, which is obviously our kind of host at the Global Centre. So UNDP is active in about 170 countries and territories around the world. And our kind of overarching focuses are poverty eradication and tackling inequality. The slide on the screen here is actually from our recent annual report. And you can see that we are working, we've got one of the largest budgets in the UN system, so about nearly $5.5 billion in revenue. Last year, we supported things like 3 million people in crisis-affected countries. We've been working at the kind of national level on kind of national integrated financing frameworks, all the way down to very kind of micro level project delivery in some of the kind of truly last mile and most marginalized communities. Our work is largely concentrated in 3 focus areas. So we focus on sustainable development, democratic governance and peace building, and then climate and disaster resilience. And our work at the Global Centre actually intersects with a lot of those areas. And we'll talk about those more in the course of my presentation. And I think Gandhar will pick up some of those as well. And obviously we're driven by achieving the sustainable development goals. So within the UN system, UNDP is a steward of the UN SDGs, which was our kind of role designated when the SDGs were first launched back in 2015. And also they are kind of our big driver in every one of the countries that we work in. Karla did a fantastic introduction to the Global Centre, but just to highlight that we are a collaboration between the government of Singapore and UNDP. But actually a lot of our work is outside of Singapore, so largely in Sub-Saharan Africa, Asia Pacific, and increasingly in Latin America as well. So as I mentioned, I'm going to focus on smart cities and the kind of urban context. I won't spend too much time on this slide here, but I just like to give you a bit of an introduction to the space. But I'm sure that many of these facts are already very familiar to you with your movers work and also your fantastic backgrounds and experience as well. So what we're going to see is that nearly 70% of the world's population will be living in cities by the middle of this century. And although we saw kind of a little bit of a kind of reversal in urban migration during the pandemic, it's still not clear whether that's a continuing trend. So far, many cities will still kind of have this urbanization trend. People aren't moving away from cities en masse just yet. The reason people move to cities is that they are still a platform of opportunity, prosperity, and well-being for many. And they also continue to play a really central role in people's lives and livelihoods. For many people, they're often the closest administrative actor, particularly in many of the countries that we work in. Central government can be quite remote. And cities also generate 80% of global GDP as well. But this central role has many positives, but also many negatives. So many cities are actually on the front lines of climate change, and almost $4 trillion worth of city assets will be at risk from climate change by 2030. But cities can also be leading what we call the Great Reset. So shaping the kind of policies, the frameworks, and the initiatives and innovations to let us kind of build forward better following the pandemic. And also in the context of things like the 4th Industrial Revolution as well. So I'm sure many of you are very familiar with the SDGs, and fundamentally we need truly smart cities rooted in all of the SDGs. But often when we talk about smart cities, we focus on SDG number 11, so sustainable cities and communities. But actually the SDGs are all interrelated, and smart cities I think are relevant for every single one of the SDG, and happy to be quizzed later on this. I think there's every single SDG has some relevance to the smart city concept. So from tackling poverty and inequality, so the SDGs number 1 and number 10, through to the potential of precision agriculture for urban agriculture, so SDG 2, which Gandhar I'm sure we'll talk about later, and even supporting the biodiversity of cities as well, so SDG 15, the life on land SDG. But also COVID-19 has had a much broader impact on SDG progress, and that is something that we also need to be engaging with. For the first time in 2 decades, our progress in tackling poverty is starting to reverse because of the pandemic. So the whole reason we need to look at the SDGs as a whole in the context of smart cities is so that hopefully we can reverse the impact of the pandemic. So all of this means broadening our understanding of what makes a city a smart city. So if you Google smart cities, which is what I've done here, you get pages after pages of high tech, 5G, lasers, big data. And this is very much one notion of a smart city. But if you look at these photos, there's often a lack of nature-based solutions, a lack of local and indigenous knowledge, and also often a lack of people as well, which is why we need to kind of really redefine what a smart city means. So what I'd like to quickly do is just kind of walk you through 3 different cities that I think highlights the wide variety of what should be a smart city. And often you'll only see one of these when you're searching on Google or similar. And I'm going to use kind of climate change as a broad example here as well. So the first city that you can see here is Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam. And this is sometimes your kind of archetypical smart city. So big focus on kind of high tech, data, Internet of Things, and so on. So for example, quite recently, the Australian government is working with the local government in Ho Chi Minh to build a kind of web of micro sensors to kind of monitor flood levels to try and tackle climate change and other impacts. So again, one very interesting notion of a smart city, very high tech, data driven, and so on. But if we stay with the kind of notion of climate change for a little bit longer, this is Singapore, where we're based. And this is a park called Bishan Park. What's really interesting here is that to tackle flooding, the government have built this park that is a kind of natural reservoir for floodwater. So instead of using just sensors, we're using a kind of natural environment to try to soak up floodwater and to redivert it into other avenues. And this is actually one big focus of the government's recent green plan, is how can we leverage more green and nature-based solutions to tackle things like climate change and other urban challenges. And then the final city is one here, is Dakar, the capital of Senegal in West Africa, which is where we do a lot of our work across UNDP. Again, with climate change, the city here encounters a lot of flooding. And one community of quite poor people in one of the suburbs is getting flooded every single year. So the community there redesigned some of their streetscapes to create kind of irrigation channels so that they could then take that flood water and start growing crops and herbs, which they could then sell in a kind of informal economy. And that's become a really important source of revenue, particularly for women and other entrepreneurs. So again, this is another notion of a smart city. It's not big data, it's not 5G, but it's about how people are using innovation and technology sometimes to improve their lives, their livelihoods, and also the urban environment. And that's why we really need to kind of broaden our definition of what a smart city means. I'll come back to that again in a moment. Just to give you a bit of background in terms of how we're actually working in redefining this concept of a smart city, our program here at the Global Center, which is very much a kind of whole of UNDP effort, is focused on these kind of 5 areas. The first is smart city delivery. So myself and the rest of the team, we were hired because we've run many smart city and digital projects around the world, so we can bring some of that technical expertise into UNDP. We're also shaping communities of practice. Often cities love to kind of learn from each other. They've got kind of common challenges, common languages sometimes, and are all keen to kind of share their respective learnings and their progress as well. We're trying to shape what we call a smart city insights platform. So how can we provide the kind of latest insights for our primary clients, which are often our UNDP country officers, but also their kind of local and national government partners. And we're also sharing knowledge and building expertise. So you'll see on our website, we have a number of kind of training courses that we've run, kind of webinars on things like connectivity, big data, lean data, and so on. But why do we see smart cities as so important in development? So beyond them being relevant for every single one of the SDGs, we also see them particularly relevant for kind of local and national development as well. The frustrating thing is sometimes when we talk to mayors and city leaders around the world, they don't engage with the concept of a smart city because they see it as a very kind of high-tech definition or kind of linear pathway from where they are now to Singapore at the end point. So the whole point of trying to redefine what a smart city means is to try and highlight that actually smart cities fundamentally are about using technology and innovation, which might be things like nature-based solutions, to improve people's lives and livelihoods and to make urban environments more livable, more sustainable, and also more inclusive. And we see that smart cities are really important in development for many of the reasons that I've got on this slide. So the first one, as I mentioned earlier, is huge trends towards urbanization. So we need to make sure that these urban spaces work for everyone. And we don't have issues like slum communities and the impacts of climate change. We also need to leverage smart city assets to improve service delivery and to provide kind of more safer and more livable spaces for people. And particularly for many cities in lower income settings, we need to make sure that they have a very strong urban offer so they can kind of position themselves for the 21st century. You've probably all heard of things like the brain drain and similar, where talented individuals, often many young people, leave the country for other opportunities. If we can highlight the relevance of smart cities in a broader way for these cities and for these countries, there's an opportunity to try to build kind of local industry, local expertise, and local innovation ecosystems as well. And finally, the point about making smart cities relevant, I think, is really important. When we talk about things like 5G and big data and AI and so on, a lot of the kind of standards and the background and the policies and regulations around these technologies are increasingly being defined in what we call the global north, so kind of richer, higher income countries. There's a very real risk there that we build these kind of policies in the north and then we just impose them on the south. We need to make sure that this is a kind of truly global conversation, and we can only get there if we're kind of building the skills, the opportunities, and the environments like smart cities across the global south as well. So with all that in mind, just a few kind of key takeaways for you all to hopefully keep in mind. So as I mentioned at the outset, cities are a really key actor in the context of the SDGs and in supporting and driving people's lives and their livelihoods. And we also see them as a much broader driver for development more widely as well, from things like circular economies to maker spaces and the role of cities in kind of providing and increasing opportunities, prosperity, and welfare. But in terms of building these cities, we need to be citizen-centered. And this means having a kind of integrated response, putting citizens at the heart of what we do, and then also drawing on the perspectives of citizens through what we call collective intelligence. So things like crowdsourcing or participatory engagement and similar. I've also highlighted a few examples of different cities today. And what's really exciting is that all cities are tackling similar challenges, but are just at very different parts of this journey. So recognizing this, we need to kind of commit to sharing, learning, and best practice to both reduce duplication, but also to kind of increase and accelerate success. And that's what I think you can all do as ambassadors within the kind of Movers network as well, is identify what's working in your city and share them with peers across the network and with policymakers, with UNDP and others. And finally, the point at the bottom, we need more smart cities and fewer smart cities. So the first one about smart cities are, very high tech, just 5G, and ones that don't really engage with people. But truly smart cities about more than technology, but about kind of leveraging innovation. So things like nature-based solutions, and fundamentally they'll be driven by the SDGs. So things like 5G and big data are very important, but they themselves don't define a smart city. Instead, a truly smart city is about how we use technology and innovation to shape more inclusive, livable, and sustainable urban environments. And these should always meet the needs, the expectations, and realities of citizens and residents as well. So thank you all for your time. I'm happy to pick up any questions now or in the Q&A at the end. Thanks, Karla.
Thank you so much, Calum. That was really, really amazing. One thing that really, for me, it's really important, this sentence, that we need safer and more livable spaces, right? I guess that's something that, we always see all these futuristic cities and we just keep this idea of that's what it should be. And if it doesn't look like this means my city is not doing great, right? But it's way more than just that. And all the examples that Calum shared help us to really see that there is all these other solutions and innovation and solutions. They don't necessarily need to be super high tech to be what the city really needs. And also these things that is locally relevant solution. Just because it's happening in Singapore doesn't mean it should happen in other places in the region. Shouldn't mean that this is how all the cities should look like, or vice versa, right? So just keep it in mind and go and check on your community, as Calum was sharing, the importance of spotting these challenges and be the one advocating to change them as well. That's super powerful. And not just to, us as youth, sometimes we don't feel like we have the power of changing all these things. This is a great way of making impact, of stand up and say this shouldn't be this. There's so many solutions that we can do that does not require us to go and explore a whole futuristic city, but it's a way of doing that. So thank you so much, Calum, for this.
Thanks, Karla.
Now I will pass it over to Gandhar so he can share more on the agriculture part of this.
Thank you, Karla, and thank you, Calum, for the great presentation. I will share my slides. Okay, I hope this is visible and you can begin.
All good.
Super. So hi everyone, welcome, and thank you to Dinlong and Karla for inviting us. I will be speaking about agriculture, sustainable agriculture, and particularly how digital technologies are making an impact in making agriculture more sustainable, fair, equitable, and also climate resilient, particularly for the most vulnerable communities engaging in it, and those are the smallholder farmers. So let's take a quick look at some of the key issues the world is facing when it comes to agriculture. So firstly, the population, global population is rising rapidly. And by 2050, we will have close to 10 billion people in the world. And with rising living standards, our diets are also changing. And what this means is we will require producing up to 98% more food than we currently do. So massively more agriculture and food production, and also consequently an increasing strain on existing natural resources. Secondly, almost 90% of the farmers in the world are smallholders. What it means is they usually own little pieces of land, uh, are in many times they fall below the poverty line. They lack access to various resources, including credit, loans, or even access to technologies. It really makes it very difficult for them to invest in their small land sizes to make it more productive and increase their yields and to get out of the poverty trap. That's why we kind of associate agriculture, subsistence agriculture, with poverty in most developing countries. There is also a huge gender gap in agriculture. Women farmers, particularly, they comprise almost half of the workforce in agriculture. But yeah, in spite of that, they lack access to resources compared to men, which includes access to credit, again, technology. They very little, many times they don't own the piece of land they work on, which creates many barriers. But in this presentation, I will focus on the issue of climate change and the various interlinkages between agriculture and climate change. So as we know, agriculture is a major contributor to climate change. Almost 14% of the global greenhouse gas emissions come from agriculture, which is a substantial number. But in addition to this, other land use changes, for example, conversion of forested land into agriculture, conversion of pasture land and grasslands for agriculture activity. This kind of irreversibly changes and adds a lot of carbon and other greenhouse gases to the environment and accelerates climate change. However, the relationship goes both ways when it comes to agriculture and climate change. Agriculture sector, particularly in developing countries, also is impacted disproportionately compared to other sectors, and also with regard to developed countries. So climate change is impacting yields, agricultural yields all over the world. It has made extreme weather events such as storms, floods, much more frequent than it was before, and it is disproportionately affects the most vulnerable communities engaged in agriculture. Those are, of course, our smallholder farmers. This is leading to increasing strain on natural resources, particularly water, but it's also increasing the pollution in our soils, making them less nutrient rich and impacting yields all over the world. As we can see in this map, the impact of climate change on agricultural productivity, it's a lot focused in developing countries, as we can see in the global south, including parts of Asia Pacific, in sub-Saharan Africa, and also Latin America. These places, which are already warmer than more temperate regions, they will face increasing temperatures, increasing stress on natural resources, and these are all the developing countries, and that's what I meant when I said that climate change disproportionately impacts agriculture in developing countries. Uh, so how is technology, how can technology play a role in this? So digital technologies, digitalization, actually agriculture is one of the last frontiers, we can say, where technology is making an impact already when it comes to services, industries. We have seen a lot of digitalization, but it's a trend which is rapidly increasing in the agriculture sector as well, and it holds a lot of potential in increasing the productivity, particularly of smallholder farmers, and eventually making it more profitable for them to continue. But also, address the environmental impact in agriculture, as we'll see later. So these are a few of the key technologies which are driving digital agriculture, as we call it. A combination of these technologies and particular applications can really play a great role in increasing productivity, but also decreasing the environmental impact of agriculture and contributing to climate action efforts. These includes mobile internet, remote sensing using satellites and drones, various advances in IoT with sensors, cloud technologies, and also various data analytic techniques involving AI, machine learning, as well as data management techniques and innovations like blockchain, we'll see. But of course, the most impactful technology, I would say, is the humble mobile phone, and now increasingly our smartphones. When we talk about digital agriculture, this is sometimes not the picture we get in our mind, but actually the mobile phone holds great potential in really improving lives and livelihoods of smallholder farmers. Almost half of the world's population now uses mobile internet, and almost 87% of them use it as a primary source for, as a primary medium for accessing internet. However, there are still various barriers, including literacy, digital skills in adoption of mobile internet. And as we mentioned earlier, there are still gender gaps in adoption of mobile technologies. Using a simple mobile, a farmer can access a variety of applications. He or she can use it to, simple apps to buy agricultural inputs, access digital platforms to access markets, to sell their produce, or get advisories on how to grow their crops in the most efficient and effective way. Get various kinds of alerts on weather activity, lots of different things. A simple mobile phone makes all of this available in the palm of your hands, and it is increasingly affordable and accessible to even the most vulnerable groups. I will focus on one of the applications of digital technologies, which holds an impact, which can really impact climate resilient agriculture, which is precision agriculture. So precision agriculture is essentially data driven farming. What we see is the data doesn't really play a role currently when it comes to farming activities. With the penetration of digital technologies and various devices, mobile phones, satellite imaging, and drones, for example, they are making very easy to generate a lot of data at the farm level, which can be processed and give various advices to farmers to make farming more efficient and thereby increasing their productivity and profitability. You can, for example, use various kinds of data to monitor your crop health, how your crops are growing, monitor what's the nutrient status of your soil, the moisture levels, keep a track of how the yields which can be expected at the end of the season, keep an eye out for pests and any extreme weather events, for example. So that's precision agriculture, essentially making use of data to make your piece of farm produce a lot of food, a lot of agricultural produce, and thereby greater profits and sustainability. So this is broadly the framework of how these various technologies come into play, and a combination of these can be included into precision agriculture solutions. So you gather a lot of data from satellite imaging, which are getting better and better. You get high resolution imagery. Drones, as we see, drones are seeing a lot of application in agriculture as well. You can really scan the farms, generate a lot of farm level data through use of various sensors. You can combine weather data, and you can actually go to your farm, use your mobile phone, take pictures of crops, and then get various advisories based on that. All of this goes into cloud, and cloud technology is really scalable, and you can use AI algorithms, machine learning algorithms to process all this huge amounts of data to generate insights and information for farmers, which they can use, actionable insights. And then these can be disseminated to the farmers, either in the form of advisory, so they can, based on all this data, they can get very customized advisories related to their farm, or in some kind of high-tech applications, these can be translated to drones and other agricultural equipment which do the thing for themselves. For example, automated drones can really know once they get this insight, they can actually cover your farm and do like precise spraying of pesticides or fertilizers based on whether they are required most. Same for agricultural machinery like automated tractors. However, these are still a bit high tech for our smallholder farmers. And as I said earlier, mobile phones still carry the most impact. And finally, speaking in the language of development, and I cannot skip talking about the SDGs and how it all links together. Digital technologies particularly play a big role in improving agriculture and play a role in all these SDGs. And with Calum, I'm happy to do a quiz later on how it all comes together when we speak about the SDGs, uh, including climate change. What are the challenges in scaling these technologies we see? Costs are falling, but it's still some of these technologies can be less affordable to most smallholder farmers, although that's increasingly changing. You require digital infrastructure, internet connectivity, basic internet, to really avail the benefits of these technologies, which is lacking. Many farmers do not, although like half of the world really currently uses mobile internet, the other half still does not. And there's the key reason behind this is the lack of digital skills. They do not know how to operate mobile phones or access the internet using it. Another challenge is you really need viable business models to provide these applications we talked about to smallholder farmers, because there's a reluctance, and many times smallholder farms cannot afford this. So how do we scale the adoption of these? How can we create viable business models which can be affordable for the most disadvantaged groups? That's again a challenge, and a lot of innovation needs to come into there, where really youth can play a big role. And again, we need an enabling policy environment that suit that promote the adoption of these technologies. Uh, Bringing it together, I'll briefly talk about Cultivate. The aim for so Cultivate essentially is a global agriculture initiative launched by the center in 2019, which it's an innovation challenge aimed at identifying really cool technological and innovation solutions in agriculture. Uh, and as part of Cultivate, we worked with 11 of our country offices, UNDP country offices across Asia, Africa, and Latin America, and sought solutions from around the world on three broad themes: rain-fed agriculture, livestock aquaculture, and urban farming. And at the end, we have identified 31 really cool solutions, which are digital solutions, and some of them are bioenvironmental solutions, which can really make an impact on making the agricultural challenges of these 11 countries can help address them. I'll talk about a few of them, just glimpse over them. One of the solutions we are working with is Pastoral. Uh, it's a mobile app essentially. It's based on GPS, and in Uzbekistan, where we aim to pilot this, it's facing huge issues in the degradation of pasture land. So there is very little regulation on uh, which pasture land can be used by herders, and which results in a lot of environmental degradation. So this app basically monitors where herds are located, keeps track of farmers' activities, shares that data with policymakers and other regulatory agencies, and essentially helps in sustainable land management. One of the other solutions is an IoT device we are working on called the Willy device. It's a precision agriculture device which monitors the water content in plants, and so that plants remain healthy and require less inputs. Uh, a bioenvironmental solution we are working is called the Toothpick Project. So this is a really cool one. It's called Toothpick Project because it essentially uses a locally grown fungus in Africa to use as a bioherbicide for tackling striga. And striga is a weed which affects millions of farmers in Africa and really causes a lot of damage, particularly in smallholder farms. And as you can see in the picture, that's the impact striga has on maize in this case. You can see the decrease in yields, which this project aims to address. These beautiful flowers are actually the weed. They're really harmful. So you can check out these solutions on our website, all of them. you will find them on a website. You can Google it. Again, thank you for listening to me, and we'll be happy to answer any questions and participate in the discussion ahead. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Gandhar. That was really, really cool. You know, even if we are like based in Singapore, we work in the same office, I'm not aware of everything they are actually working on. And really now seeing all these really cool ideas and all these solutions that you're helping to scale up, it's really, really cool. And thank you so much for sharing. One of the takeaways that I want to take from what you started with, you know, that there is a huge gender gap in agriculture. And I will also go back to what Calum was mentioning before. We don't really realize, but there's no way of achieving all the SDGs, like only one SDGs and say like you make it, right? This is just an example of how the SDG number 13 is highly connected to all the other SDGs, and we have gender equality that is still something really important when you think about it, right? People working in the farm, even in my home country, I always just see men in there, and the girls are the ones who need to take care of the house. And this is how it has always been. And things are changing. Yes, the mentality is changing, but it's still a lot to do. And this is something that us as youth, we play a huge role, educating and sharing, you know, how things should be, that gender equality is a thing. And I know in the region, this is also a huge issue that we still have. Another thing that I wanted to highlight was these solutions that you were mentioning. There is a lot of technology, and there always people come up with more and more different ways of actually solving a problem as simple as, you know, your plants at home, as you were sharing with this Welly device. Something that for me, I'm really bad at taking care of plants and doing my best, but they always die somehow. And I know, you know, it's something that we all have. We are all facing this issue, and someone said, okay, why don't we solve it this way? And someone in another country is trying to solve it in another way. But the issue is not all this technology. The issue is how do you make it affordable and able for small populations, for developing countries to actually get access to this. And one thing that I want to highlight is that all these solutions, of course, the government plays a huge role, and organizations, UNDP, we play a huge role on sharing and being advocates for this. But it's not only our job, it's the job of everyone to make this happen. And this is, for example, how social entrepreneurship comes on board, right? There is this technology, and maybe some of you have already an idea or how to really take advantage of technology and solve any problems in the climate atmosphere. Then just think about how you can make it affordable for other people, how you can create a business that it's actually going to help more and more people to get access to this, that can really make a difference. It could really mean whether or not people get to have food to eat, right? It could really mean, like, as you saw on the map that Gandhar shared, it's really going very bad. 25% I saw less in my country, and it's really scary. But you play a huge role in there. And if you know there is a challenge like this, you should go ahead and try to find ways of solving, or just being an advocate and spotting these things as well. And okay, I know there is a lot of questions already in the chat. So I wanna check if I saw someone was raising their hand, but not anymore. So maybe I will go back to the chat and share this. So we have one question from Legion. Would you like to ask your question, or should I? Maybe you can just unmute yourself and share.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm curious about whether sustainable tourism is connected to the smart cities, because now we know that due to the climate change, some cities can be flooded by the rising sea level, while others can suffer from, for example, like the heat. I just wonder whether they're connected, and how we can make sure how we can deal with the challenging faced in the industry, especially tourism, especially the urban tourism industry. Maybe my question is not so clear. I just wondered,
No, no,
have a lot of
it's
questions.
very clear. Yeah, no, it's very, very clear, and it's a really great question. So I think there's a few angles to this. You're completely right that first, tourism is obviously can have a very negative impact. We see things like cruise ships, particularly on kind of island states, city ports and similar, the kind of environmental impacts of those. You mentioned your question, in terms of footfall, the amount of people visiting cities and so on. But then also tourism can be a huge benefit for local economies. And we saw the impact of that during the pandemic last year. So we do a lot of work with what we call small island developing states. And many of those countries rely, sometimes up to 90% of their GDP will come from tourism. So this is very much linked to the kind of concept of the smart city. And what we need to try and do is figure out actually, firstly, the kind of typical ways that tourism probably can't continue because of the kind of huge negative impact that they have. So how can we perhaps leverage technology and innovation to make them better? And that might be using super high-tech things like augmented reality and virtual reality to make the experience a little bit more different. Or it might be more kind of fundamental roles about how do we design cities and places better to try to mitigate the impact of tourism. There's actually a UN body, the World Tourism Organization, that's doing a lot of work around this, actually, who we work quite closely with. And they've got some really good stuff they published on their website, I think last month, just about this as well. So happy to share some links via email.
Thank you, Calum.
No worries, thank you.
Thank you so much for your question. Now I will maybe pass it over to Steve Harrison. He had a question as well. Steve, would you like to?
Yeah, thank you, Karla. Yeah, my question is to Gandhar. Yeah, how can we include local wisdom in the precision agriculture, since it's totally techie business? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that's a good question. Let me try to answer that. Firstly, local wisdom has a really important role to play in agriculture sustainability. What we see is, and local wisdom, I'm also including local knowledge of local crops and local plants. That's very rapidly disappearing. What we see is the same species of crops, food crops grown everywhere all around the world, which may or may not be suitable in terms of climate resilience. A lot of genetic biodiversity is being lost because of this practice, which is partly a result of the Green Revolution. So I think knowledge of local crops, what grows best in a certain geographic location, I think that's really important to maintain and restore when we talk about super crops or super food, like various kinds of various crops or various varieties of fruits and vegetables or millets. These are the local varieties are resilient to climate change, and it's really important to integrate them and their cultivation in agriculture. How it relates to precision agriculture is, of course, it involves data, right? So local knowledge, what grows best, I think a lot of this modeling can really come from farmers and their knowledge of what grows best, and it can really help build models which can be trained to offer good insights, not only to those farmers, but everyone growing those kinds of crops. So I think there's a good link between data and local knowledge and wisdom, traditional knowledge.
Just to add to that, just briefly as well, I think, as Karla mentioned at the very outset, one of the big roles of UNDP is working with governments to try to, I guess, democratize innovation and kind of lower the barriers to entry. So whether it's smart cities or urban agriculture, we're seeing a lot of work around things like maker spaces and similar, who are kind of building sensors, other devices, sometimes with very small amounts of money, but kind of building local skills locally. So, for example, last year we did a lot of work with things like 3D printing and similar. So precision agriculture isn't just drones and similar, it's also kind of sensors that Gandhar mentioned too. And many of these can be developed locally, and also a really exciting opportunity for entrepreneurship, skills building, skills development, and local industry as well.
Thank you all for answering this question. Okay, now we have so many questions that I want to give the chance to all of them. So I will go to Sagar. Sagar, would you like to share?
Thank you, Karla. So my question is, how can economically and research poor country like Nepal adapt to climate smart agriculture technology? What do you see as the major challenges for the developing nations? Question to Gandhar.
Thanks, Sagar. So I think one of the biggest benefits of digital technologies is it's really scalable, and that can be a focus area which involves really scalable technologies, including mobile phones, which are already present. One of the solutions could be building applications which needs local farmers' needs, rather than focusing on the high-tech stuff, right? You can focus on things which are really scalable and really and another approach could be, as I mentioned, viable business models. For example, we have drones which can be used for sensing of farms, various parameters, can also be used for applying fertilizers and pesticides in a very targeted way. Now it's not possible for an individual farmer to purchase a drone, learn how to operate it, learn what goes into really to the precise applications and things like that. It's a very technical job. However, if for example a contractor buys a drone and services a lot of farms, or like a farmer group or a cooperative, then the same technology can be scaled across many number of farmers. So that's what I mean by creating viable business models which farmers would be willing to pay in using. So that's a key component in scaling the adoption of these, including in developing countries. It's not that these are not applicable to developing countries. In fact, they are very much applicable and most beneficial to developing countries, given the potential of the scalability these technologies bring.
Thank you so much, Calum. Now we have a question for Gandhar, for Calum. So I will read it this time. It says, recent studies show disconnection between nature-based solution approach from smart city initiatives and projects. Do you think combining resilient and smart cities should be considered as a more important approach to addressing climate change issues? How could developing countries adapt to this approach? And which one is easier to adapt, financially speaking?
That's a very, very good but massive question. So I think that you're completely right. There is this kind of tension, as I mentioned in my presentation, that a lot of the time we just focus on the high tech and forget about nature-based solutions. We definitely need to be doing both. Resilience has been a really interesting area because it's mobilized a lot of cities around these kind of concepts. So we saw quite a few years ago, the Rockefeller Foundation had their 100 Resilient Cities Network, and we worked very closely with the kind of spin out of that as well. And what that did is it identified 100 cities around the world, and then they funded in each city a chief resilience officer. So in the kind of very top levels of the administration, at a kind of mayor level, a chief resilience officer. And what that did is it kind of put resilience on the agenda for many cities, but it also highlighted the importance of kind of building resilience into policies, programs and other interventions in the city as well. So I think when we have the topic in mind and front of center like that, it can really drive a lot of innovation, whether it's using tech or things like nature-based solutions. The tricky thing though is actually trying to make it politically relevant and politically salient. And I think that's what the innovation did really well, about actually trying to position these people at the very center of the kind of administration. So when we're trying to do smart cities, the challenge that we have sometimes is that smart cities are seen as technology, so they basically get kind of hived away into IT. But actually a smart city is a fundamental way of delivering a better urban environment for your citizens and other residents. So we need to make sure that the smart city concept is applicable to everyone in the city administration. Everyone sees it as a kind of really important tool for how they deliver their policies, their solutions or similar. If not, then you're completely right. There's a real risk that we don't actually end up making much progress in the context of a smart city.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Calum, for answering that question. Now I will pass it to Sophie, who has been raising her hand for a while. Sorry about that.
Okay, I come from China, so I have a question about here. What do you think about China's sustainable agriculture, please?
I'm not, I can't talk in detail about some examples, but China is doing a great job in scaling the adoption of a few technologies. And particularly, I'm aware of drones, given that many of the large drone manufacturers are based in China, DJI, XCG. They have developed a lot of solutions targeted at smallholder farmers, which can be applied for precision agriculture applications. So there is really a lot of innovation going on in China, which again is spreading across Asia Pacific.
Thank you, thank you.
Okay, we're running out of time and we still have a lot of questions. I would also share the questions with them, and I will share then the answers in the group as well. But maybe now one question that Belinda raised was important for me to highlight as well, which is the role that you play in these two atmospheres of, smart cities, digitalization, and smart agriculture. And we mentioned it before. I believe I was also pointing out at the fact that you are the ones advocating, realizing what challenges are in your community, come up with projects, come up with solutions, share that, and mobilize your community to do things around it, create a social enterprise that can really help this technology to be more affordable. But I want to ask Calum and Gandhar if there's something else that you think the young people across Asia Pacific should be doing for us to be able to achieve the SDG climate action.
Oh, that's Karla. So I think there's three things that really come to mind, and you've touched upon all of them. The very first one is just being engaged in your local community. So, engaging with might be your local councillor, MP, or similar, to kind of really engage with the challenges being faced in your city, and obviously trying to push for change as well through kind of existing channels and opportunities. The second one is that we see a lot of work around, fintech, deep tech, med tech, reg tech, all these different areas. But in many cities and many regions, we don't see a lot of work around civic tech. It's a growing area, but there's enormous potential for it. Many of the kind of startups that I talked to since before joining UNDP as well, often don't engage with the civic tech space because there's issues with, talking to city administrations, challenges around corruption and so on. But if you can build a civic tech enterprise or innovation, there's phenomenal potential for impact and also huge potential for income and so on. And then the third one, I think, is just keep participating in things like the Movers community, learn from each other, share what's working in other cities around the world, learn what's working in other cities as well, and kind of build this kind of global network, because we're only going to make this work if we all try to figure this stuff out together. Every city is facing very similar challenges, particularly in the context of COVID response and recovery. We're just at slightly different parts of that journey. So we need to be learning, I think, from each other.
Thanks, Calum. From my side as well, I would stress on community engagement for youth, especially in agriculture. I think youth can really play a big role in scaling up these technologies, given the disconnect between generations and lack of awareness and skills in the older generations. We see that the younger generations are moving away from agriculture. They do not see it as a profitable endeavor, not exciting enough. However, the use of technologies can really make it something much more exciting, especially for the youth. And that requires community engagement, because agriculture and farming is necessarily something that happens on the ground. You need to engage with the farmers, whether it's training them, making them aware of these technologies, or perhaps starting your own enterprise to help the community. So you are not only making a profitable, and believe me, there's a huge potential for disruption, making even profits in this space, but you will also be helping out your local communities and promoting sustainable agriculture. The second point I would add in terms of for climate action particularly is youth can really play a big role in advocacy and awareness building on these issues, because the food systems, they create a lot of, there are several issues as we discussed, a lot of pollution, a lot of deforestation in how food is manufactured, produced, and brought to your market. So I think there needs to be more awareness on where your food is coming from, how it is produced, which kind of fertilizers it uses, did it involve some kind of deforestation in producing it? And I think, especially with access to social media and their great presence on it, I think youth can really amplify these voices and bring up these issues into global discourse and thereby promote climate action.
Thank you so much, Gandhar, and Calum, for answering this question. I think this is a good way for us to close with the Q&A. I'm so sorry, there's so many other questions that we will do our best to reply as well on the group. But now, just I want to close the discussion of today with a wrap up on what has been discussed today. First, one takeaway that I believe is very important for all of us is to see that smart cities it's not equal to high-tech solutions. There is way more there. There is everything, and have a people-centric perspective as well. So you are not just creating cities that look well, that seems to work. It's all about how you can solve the issues of your community, of the people living in the cities as well. So that's something that is really important for us to keep in mind, and that you are the ones advocating always. You are the ones seeing the problem. You are the ones living in the city. So no one else can just come and say, this is a great solution that is working in another part of the world, and let's just copy paste it in our context. That's not how it works. You need to understand what is the issue, what are your resources, as one of the questions. Maybe in Nepal, what you have and your resources available are way different, and the climate and everything than in other places in the world. So things need to be really adapted. Then we have the huge power that, yes, technology has for agriculture, but not just going to all these big technologies that we have seen in the movies and such. It's more also just to think something as simple as your mobile phone, right? And this really changes a whole different perspective. It helps the farmers to get connected, to understand more their resources, how to actually take advantage of their land and such. So this is the power of internet that clearly wasn't the case back 20 years ago. So just to also finish this, I would say the importance of to have a network, an international network, to listen to you guys, what is happening in my city, share it with other people. I think YECAP and the movers community is a really good opportunity for you guys to engage and to listen to each other, learn from your mistakes. And this is the only way for us to actually achieve our goals. If we don't work together, if we don't listen to what has worked, what is not working, what we should be doing, then it's really hard for us isolated in each city to do what we can. And now, just before we finish, we would like to take a group photo. So please, everyone can just turn on their cameras. And of course, just say thank you so much for our speakers today.
And thank you to Karla for fantastic facilitation as well, who is an expert in herself. So thank you, Karla.
Karla's a real pro in this.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's just see if we have more people joining.
Hopeful and interesting discussion.
Thank you so much, Ali. Okay, so Ding Long, could you help me to take the photo?
Yes, of course. So yeah, everyone. So if you have been with us, you know that we have 3 poses that we always do. So you can follow the Korean heart if you're a K-pop fan, or K-drama, or K-food, okay, anything. You can do the Mexican heart like this, or like this. Or you can do the stretching heart if you are tired. It's a good way to wake up for your next call. So choose your side, hold your pose. I will count to 3. And we have a couple of pages. So just hold your pose for 5 seconds. Okay. So 1, 2, 3. One, two, three for the second page. Yay, thank you. Back to you, Karla.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you all for joining us today. Thank you, Calum. Thank you, Gandhar. Thank you, Dinglong. Thank you, Sabi, everyone. And yeah, I will be in touch. Anything else, you all have my email as well. So see you all in the next sessions.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.